Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. We've been talking about blood flow through the body, and we need to stop and talk a little bit about the venous blood flow. Now, there's actually three ways, I guess, or three effects of how we're getting the blood flowing through the venous system. So one way is, remember, the blood is flowing from a high pressure to a low pressure. And what we're going to see is that the atrial is almost zero. So what that means is, like, it has the lowest pressure in the body. So even if there's not a lot of blood pressure in the vein, there's probably still more in the vein than there is in the atria. And so because blood is flowing from a high pressure to a low pressure, this is like a pull to bring the blood back to the heart. So this is sort of like a pull to bring the blood back to the heart. And then we have two pumps. So we have what we can call the skeletal muscle pump. And then we have what we can call the respiratory pump. Okay. So let's look at the skeletal muscle pump first. And I have included a diagram from our OpenStax textbook. Remember, the text is linked in our video description. And what we're seeing here is the beauty of the valve in the vein. And then we're seeing that it's really the surrounding skeletal muscle that's pushing blood through the venous system. Remember, the vein itself doesn't have a very thick tunica media, so there's not a lot of smooth muscle in the vein. And so what we'll see is when skeletal muscle surrounds the vein, when that skeletal muscle contracts, it's basically squeezing the vein, pushing the blood up through the vessel, right? And when the skeletal muscle squeezes the vein, pushes the blood up, that's opening that valve. And then when that skeletal muscle relaxes, the valve closes. And so any movement of blood toward the heart falls back to the valve, but not back to the bottom of the leg, right? So we're effectively going up the leg in little increments. My mom used to always say, we got to get that blood moving, right? And so what she's trying to tell me is I needed to get up and move around my body. And when we do that, we're pumping our blood literally through the venous system. So one way of increasing venous return is just increasing your physical activity. Our textbook talks about soldiers are trained when they're standing at attention to do little micro contractions of the muscle in their leg in order to keep that blood flowing so that it's not collecting in their lower extremities. So the skeletal muscle pump is when you contract surrounding skeletal muscle. So that's going to then push the blood through the valve against gravity toward heart. And then notice when the skeletal muscle relaxes, the valve closes, preventing backflow. And then I have here the inferior. So once you got blood to a certain level, the valve below it, so the inferior valve is going to prevent backflow. When we talk about the respiratory pump, what we're going to see here is when we inhale. When we inhale, we're going to decrease the thoracic pressure. So this is doing two things. When we talk about respiratory system, we'll see that that's going to pull air into the body. Yeah. But what we're seeing in the cardiovascular system is that the blood is going to move along this pressure gradient. Into the thorax. So we contract the skeletal muscle of our thoracic cage in order to make our thoracic cage bigger. This is reducing the pressure in our thoracic cage. That's our inhale. So that's how we actually get air into the body. But also, this is so cool to me. Also, that's how we're like kind of like pulling blood up into the thoracic cavity. And then the atrial pressure is like 0. So that's like, once you get into the thoracic cavity, then you're going to get pulled into that atria because of that pressure gradient. Isn't that so cool? This is so cool. All right. Up next, we're going to look at how we actually get stuff, how we use these pressures to actually get the oxygen and the nutrients and so forth out of the blood into your tissues, and then how we get like a little circulation in that surrounding tissue. Okay, so stay tuned for the next video, and as always, take care of yourselves and each other.